Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for increasing foundation grants by demonstrating the value of your programs in your organization. Let me just say right off the bat that it's going to be a very intense session as it was last time, and so, put your seatbelts on and hang in there. We may go a little bit over time, but we'll certainly make time for the question and answers, and if we run out of time, we will still answer the questions and include the answers in the materials that we send you either later today or first thing tomorrow morning. So this is an introduction to outcome and value-focused approach to your whole organization. I'm a manager of not-for-profit sector and a specialist in fundraising, not a social scientist, but like many of us, we've had to wear many different hats and learn many skills outside of what would normally be our area of expertise. So you're going to get a manager's director of a not-for-profit and a fundraiser's perspective on outcome-driven organizations. I know from experience that what gets measured gets done, and so I just want to let you know right up front that I am very much an advocate of this approach. We'll go over why outcome measurement has become such a focus within our environment, a model for impact-driven organization, outcome learning cycle, the challenges and risks and how to mitigate those challenges, the benefits of outcome-focused approach, the measurement framework, core areas for outcome measurement, steps for implementing an outcome measurement system, and identifying key performance indicators and selecting outcome measurement tools, which are, important components of the key steps that I thought we'd just draw out and focus on a little bit. And then lastly, how to communicate those outcomes in order to better serve your organization. So why the increased focus on outcomes? Foundations are risk adverse. This means that they see themselves as investing in your organization and taking a chance, literally taking a chance on you being able to deliver on what it is that you said that you were going to, your ability to fulfill your mission. This, in the area of governance or operations or finances or regulation compliance, and any number of these areas, things can go wrong. Not by malicious, but just simply, because of the nature of what it is that we're doing. So the burden of proof is on the not-for-profit organization that you're managing this risk, that you are well set up, healthy enough to be able to fulfill your mission and moving in that direction. This is all put under the general rubric of accountability. With increased competition, the number of not-for-profit organizations has increased anywhere from 30 to 50% estimates I've heard, and this obviously means a lot of people, a lot of organizations wanting a share of a fairly stable pie. The pie has grown, but not at the same degree as the number of organizations. So increased competition heightens the need for increased scrutiny, as well as the foundations are completely inundated with applications, so they are trying to find a way to maneuver through all of that, find a way to make sure that they're giving their funds to the right people as far as they're concerned. And so all of this has led to more and more scrutiny, more and more focus on outcomes. We've also shifted, because of these two factors, we've shifted into a business model for not-for-profit organizations. And, of course, the business model includes utilizing business tools. Businesses operate, focus on metrics, and use them at every step of the process to incent staff, determine success, and so on. The shareholders demand quantifiable measurements at every level. The funders, the donors, the foundations consider themselves to be stakeholders in your not-for-profit organization, to be stakeholders in your solution for a particular social problem. And so they're making the same demand to provide metrics on how you're doing all the way along the process, and how ultimately you are making social change. So the challenge for not-for-profit organizations is to quantify that. Foundations are very interested in two main factors that they use to decide who receives the grants are impact and performance. From a survey by the Hope Consulting Group of 745 foundations and over 21 surveys, these were the two areas that were identified. They were also identified as the two areas in which foundations feel they receive the least amount of information. It's the most important, and they feel that they're not getting the information that they need to make their decisions from not-for-profit organizations. So, of course, this means an increase in focus on foundations as well. But ultimately, the focus on foundations needs to be driven by the not-for-profit organizations' will towards their mission and their vision and the change they want to make in the world. This is the most important reason for pursuing foundations and focusing on impact to help your organization succeed at achieving its goals, and that and motivating your staff in the day-to-day workings of programs and so forth. So the impact model that we're using here is just to help us understand the definitions and what it is that we're calling the approach to outcomes, what the components of that are. Don't worry too much about the words. It's really easy to get hung up on the complicated discussion of what is impact versus what is input and output and all of that, and you will find that these get defined slightly differently depending on what source material you're looking at and depending on the foundation or the government group in terms of how they want you to report on these. But just to make sure that we're all on the same page for our discussion today, these are the general definitions that we'll be utilizing today, and I think they're fairly widespread. Of course, whenever you are speaking to any particular audience that's asking you to report very specifically on any of these, you should look at their definition of what these elements are. So first of all is the needs at the very top. This is the foundation and the environment in which the whole process is occurring. The needs statement that you develop for your case for support. What is the problem? What is the need in the community? Maybe it's a gap in service. Perhaps it's a particular situation or population who has a need in order to solve a particular problem. Look at what the scope of that is, what geographically the effect is of the particular problem or situation, the scale, who's affected, how large a group is that. So a really clear idea of what the problem is and the context in which everything else is going to happen in is a very important and, in fact, foundational to the whole process. Next, inputs. Inputs are the resources and activities that are put towards an activity. Inputs are not the actual result of what you do. They are more the allocation of time, people, the expertise in terms of knowledge of the systems. All of that are the inputs that then generate the programs and the actions that you're going to take towards solving a particular situation. The outputs are the measurement in some form of how those outputs are actually, how those inputs are actually happening. In other words, it's the short-term measurements of your activities as they relate to your capacity to carry out the work and the progress that you are making in implementing your strategies. So if your activity, for example, is to have a drop-in program, let's say you're a youth center and you have a drop-in program for young people, then that would be your input, would be the activity of the drop-in program. You would have staff allocated to that, space allocated to that. There would be a certain amount of money allocated to that. That would all be your inputs and activities. Your output would be the number of young people who actually attend, who actually come into the drop-in center, and you would have goals set on that. They might be percentages of the youth who you designate as your universe, the percentage of those that actually come into your center, or it may be just a straight-up number of attendees. What the effect on those attendees of the program that you are, the activities that you are serving them with, what the effect of that is are your outcomes. So the anticipated, the effect of the program, short and long term as well as intermediate, are the actual outcomes of the program itself. How do you know what is working? How do you know how you're doing along the way? This is where the key performance indicators come into play. These are the signs or the clues that you are monitoring in order to measure the progress you have made towards your outcome. They are quantifiable assessment of your progress towards your overall vision and overall success of your organization. In other words, how these are steps along or milestones along the way on how you're doing on actually reaching your vision. And your vision is the change in society or in the need, the situation, a problem that your intervention, which was your inputs and activities, had on a particular problem. So that is one way to define impact, a way of summing up all of the benefits and changes that your organization had to a specific problem or situation. In a feedback loop, you would be drawing data from the work that you did in the inputs and the activities based on the key indicators, and you would collect only data that you can actually use with an eye to the sensitivities of the information that you're collecting for the people that you're collecting information about, who's involved in the choice and design of the outcome, and fitting it into your everyday programs as well. This is one of the big changes in our in the fundraising foundation environment, is that they're looking for these outcomes, as you can see by this diagram, to be actually central to the whole implementation of your programs, rather than being something that you do afterwards. It actually becomes part of your whole process. So the inputs and your activities are the things that you do that you feel will be able to solve the problem that you have identified. And then that leads to creating an output and outcome framework, actual anticipated outcomes that you feel will come from these activities. With those frameworks, you actually then use those to measure the outputs and the outcomes. Those measurements, from those measurements, you learn, you draw certain conclusions about the effectiveness of your programs and activities, resource allocations, and so forth. And in that learning, you then return to your inputs and activities and make changes based on the conclusions and the learning that you drew from the measurement of outcomes. You then go back and look at your framework, clarify it, and again measure the outputs and outcomes, draw conclusions, make changes. This is an ongoing process that your organization is always involved within. This really is the core of what an outcome approach is to fundraising, to an organization. So they are challenges and risks, of course, to to this approach, and they should not be ignored. They need to be identified and dealt with in a very upfront kind of way. So one of the first is the impact on resources. I think we all agree that implementing an outcome measurement program can be expensive and time-consuming process. I know some people try to save money on it or try to prevent it from having to make real changes within the organization by underestimating the level of resources for data collection and entry that is required. But this actually, in turn, prevents the organization from benefiting from the outcome approach, and it becomes a kind of a downward spiral in terms of the impact on the organization. It leads to one of the greatest challenges, which is that outcome measurement be sustained over time. You know, many organizations start out with great enthusiasm, and then the pressures of service delivery, the pressures on resources, have them moving away from outcome measurement approach. So it requires a real commitment to an ongoing process, as well as an allocation of resources to it, and having it be, as we said earlier, integrated right into the delivery of your services. Another area of challenge or risk is the impact on staff. Some service delivery staff may feel, in fact, threatened by an outcome measurement system, and they can feel that they're being over-scrutinized and that their jobs and the services they provide are threatened by an outcome approach. And so this needs to be turned on its head and, in fact, seen as a part of the work that they do and as a motivating factor in terms of recognition of the progress that they make and the work that they do. Another area of impact is in service delivery. The amount of time that outcome approach can take, as well as the adverse impact in terms of the measurements, if the measurements are not favorable, can be another reason why people shy away. I think one of the major concern that many staff have on this approach as far as service delivery is that only the things that are measured are going to be focused upon, and other areas are going to be ignored, or that the pressure on a particular outcome can skew this delivery of service. For example, if the organization has an overly focused on the return of a child to their biological parent's home as an indicator of success, I think a lot of service delivery staff are concerned that there will be so much pressure on that to happen that children would actually be returned to homes that are significantly at risk or not stable enough yet in order just to be able to deliver on that particular outcome. I think these concerns are valid, and one has to build a system that prevents that type of misuse of information. The information that is collected on the outcome measurement approach has limitations, and those limitations have to be taken into account in using them to manage the whole process. Measurement tools are subject to mistakes and lack of quality as any other psychometrics that might be used by an organization, and there's biases that can come in based on the context. There are things outside of the control of the organization or the service providers that can skew the numbers, and all of that type of limitation of the information must be carefully brought into the discussion of outcomes for any organization. So though the risks are there, they're present, and they can appear really daunting, I think particularly around staff and service delivery, you know, a well-planned and well-executed implementation process can mitigate these concerns, also including all of the staff within the process of coming up with the outcome framework can also mitigate some of these concerns. So going forward, what are the benefits of an outcome-focused approach? It gives you an opportunity to demonstrate value, the impact, and the successes of your programs. It gives you an overview of the situation of concern and how it's changing over time. This, of course, can contribute long-term to the evaluation of the issue for future funding. Most of the problems we're dealing with are not solved by just simply one program. So this is very important, crucial, in fact, information that the whole sector needs. The client focus of outcomes creates an environment that is focused on the client and can greatly engage both staff and the population you're trying to serve in the whole process, giving you an opportunity to work with clients and assess their progress and the effectiveness of your programs, also giving you a shared language for everybody that works on the programs as well. The focus, which is different in the organization, can create a very inspiring vision for everybody involved and motivate them towards shared goals, which can be very inspiring. It can also be used as a management, outcome approach can also be used as a management tool in terms of focus of the organizations and its systems and resource allocation and learnings along the way, help you understand what it is you're doing and to what extent that is working or not working, guide decisions for planning and strategic steps for an organization, as well as increase the efficiency and effectiveness of everything that you do. Because it's true that a focus and what gets measured is what becomes what gets done for most organizations. So overall, there's a framework that for outcome measurement approach using the acronym SMARTER, which means for the S that the measurements are significant, they help your organization stand out and stretch so that they're sustainable, that what you're measuring is, what you're monitoring is measurable, it's meaningful and motivational for everybody involved, that the goals and the key indicators are in fact attainable, that they're agreed upon before you even begin the process, and that you can achieve them. They're action-oriented. In other words, everything that you are monitoring leads to an action that your organization may take. Realistic in the same sense as attainable and reasonable and results-oriented, time-based and timely in terms of their, you can in fact track them, enabling, encouraging, that you're evaluating there and that your evaluation is equitable and reliable and relevant to the work that you are actually doing. So this is the acronym SMARTER, and I think gives us an overall framework on how to approach the measurement program. One can measure in 4 core areas. In the area of leadership and management, here you're looking for key performance indicators, and remember that the key performance indicators are observable, measurable characteristics of the person or of the situation, which can be linked to the change that you are moving towards as an organization. So in the area of leadership, this would be key indicators or measurements that relate to the efficiency and the quality of your operations, the changes in your capacity or expertise that are relevant to your fulfillment of your mission and in comparison to others within your sector. Community engagement are the indicators of the level of participation, both in terms of who and in terms of size, as well as to the larger community of your organization. financial key indicators relate to the strategies and goals that you have financially as related to the programs, such things as cost-benefit analysis, social return on investments, the success or the efficiency of your fundraising programs, and so forth. Program impact outcomes and key performance indicators relate to the effectiveness of your programs for the populations that you're serving. So this is where we'll just take a more deliberate focus after we just cover some examples of the outcome on the 4 key areas. Here, in terms of outputs and outcomes, we are wanting to shift from a focus on effort of the organization to the efficiency of those efforts, from the activities to the achievement of the desired results for the clients, from the behavior of the not-for-profit to the behavior of the client. So in the leadership area, the output would be the number of community outreach activities that the organization takes, and then you'd shift to what that means for the clients. So the number of clients citing how the outreach programs as a key factor in the decision to actually utilize the services of a particular agency. The community engagement, you would take the number of articles that your organization generates through its PR department and change that into a shift towards the clients, which is how many volunteers cite the media as the pull or the attraction that brought them to the organization. Financial stability, here's an example. Staff recruitment and training activities would become, as far as outcome goes, the reduction in staff turnover, and therefore the more consistent programming would be the outcome that was actually sought there. And then in terms of program impact, for example, in this community-based organization to reduce poverty, it would be the number of clients enrolled in employment programs, for example, would be the output, and the outcome would be the number of clients getting jobs in targeted industries. So we're going to focus on the implementation of outcomes in a program outcome management. So the first step is to determine who will be involved in developing the process. It's a good idea to set up an outcome measurements group, and this should include and be led by anybody in specialized areas. For example, if it's a program outcome, this should probably be led by the program service staff. Financial outcomes would be led by the accounting staff and so forth. You would probably then have some overarching leadership in the process that may come from the executive office. Also pull in people and volunteers as needed with specialized skills. Many of the measurement processes involved social science measurement tools, and your local university or college is a great resource to go to find people who are interested in assisting your organization in looking at what the impacts and the outcomes that you have created. I just got a note saying I should slow down, so I will. I hope we can still cover everything we're trying to do here today. The next step is to articulate the problem. This is your needs statement again, the problem, the need, the situation, and to clearly identify the clients who you are serving, the populations that you are serving. Then the next step is to determine the impact. Often organizations go from step number 2 to looking at what programs that they may want to create in order to address the problem. Here we're suggesting to you that you actually look at the outcome, the impact that you want to make, and identify what the outputs would be, the productivity in terms of how many people you would like to be involved, the percentage of the population, who you're serving that you'd want to have coming through your doors or connecting with in some way, and then the effects that a program would have on them, short-term, intermediate, and long-term. And once you've determined that effect, then you would look at the activities and the inputs, the resources and the programs that are best suited to actually achieving those goals. So it's a different way of going about the outcomes and inputs, and a bit different than what we showed you earlier in the model. But remember that this is a circular process. It's not a one-off and a linear process. It's much more organic than that, and you are going within a cycle. So we're suggesting that the first place to go is in the impacts you want, and then to go to the activities that you feel would actually fulfill those the goals that you're trying to achieve. The key indicators would be the next thing that you would plan. What are the indications that you are on your way to achieving your vision as an organization? What shows you that your reach is right, that your productivity, what you're creating is at the right level, and what is showing you that the effects that those programs are having in terms of how they're impacting the population and leading you to your ultimate goal. And then you're going to select the data sources and the measurement tools for each of these indicators. We're going to come back to step number 5 and number 6 in a little bit more detail once we've got this overview. And so the next step is to identify the client and service characteristics to be linked to the outcomes. I mention this here because sometimes the information or the outcome can be skewed by differences in your client base. So it's a good idea to compile your data into various categories based on demographics of your different populations that are utilizing your services. So it might be based on gender or age groups or income levels, handicap levels, ethnicity or race, and to use this information to help you better target and deliver your services. Other areas that you might look at in terms of distinguishing your outcomes might be the specific office or facility where the work was delivered, what type of caseworkers were focused on there, the characteristics of any of the services or the types of services, such as was it counseling, was it delivered locally, was it delivered via electronics such as the internet or what have you. So you may want to take your outcomes and divide it up with these various characteristics in order to refine your measurement. Next step is to test your procedures, to test your outcome management method and make any modifications that you're needing to and then implement. Don't forget to account for any external factors that are outside of your control, as these may actually impact the measurements that you are doing and change over time. So they need to be recorded and become a filter from which you look through your data. So once you've been collecting data, you then start to examine it, look for any unusual or unexpected findings, and be open to those. Draw conclusions from the data and learn from what information that you're receiving. And then, of course, be communicating these outcomes and findings to various sectors, whether it's to your staff or to funders or other stakeholders, and then making changes to your inputs and your activities as needed in order to better deliver services or better communicate or what have you. So you're really returning to step number 2 and going through the cycle. As even though this presentation is linear, I want to keep reminding you that this is a cycle. cycle, some of the determinants that you may want to take into account as far as the changes that you have is what would be better identification of key clients and services, what would be more motivational for staff, what could improve services or the delivery of services, and then to identify and celebrate what is working really well and perpetuate that part of the process and what it is that you're bringing to this. So coming back to step number 5 in a little bit more detail, looking at identifying the key performance indicators. For the first step is to determine how you will utilize the data. Will you utilize it for reporting to funders, maybe identifying gaps in your service, maybe using it to bid for more work if you're an agency? All of these various, or maybe it's a combination of these. How you will use the information becomes very much a basis for what information that you will collect. And in fact, you shouldn't collect information that you won't use in some form. This keeps your outcome measurement process really streamlined. And then identify the outcomes as the changes, the benefits, or lessons, or other effects that result from the actual work that you do. Use the outcome sequence chart. This is if you're building your own performance indicators, which this step includes a mapping what each stage of the journey to change is, considering what the characteristics of each of those stages would be, and then charting the indications of successfully reaching that stage, utilizing a kind of a thinking where you're saying, what would it look like if the population that we're serving actually achieved that level of change within the journey. So there's a lot of different ways of sequencing this. This is just one example. I just want to mention that in this particular example of the sequencing, this approach by this report has within the intermediate outcomes one of the inputs as we've identified what inputs and outcomes are. So just to mention to you in terms of the language that we've been using. This is an outcome sequence chart for an adult education and family literacy program. So here the goal is to enable adults to acquire the basic skills necessary to function in today's society so that they can benefit from the completion of a secondary school enhanced family life, attaining citizenship, and participating in job training and retention programs. So the map of that process and the indicators below, I'm not going to get into all of them. I'll just point out a couple of them so you can get a sense of what this process is like. This indicator here is an output indicator, so increased enrollment in the adult education and literacy program is the output, the goal, and then the indicator of that would be the number of participants that are enrolled in the adult education program. Obviously, you'd be wanting to see increases in that. So the output you want to reach and the indicator that you are reaching it. Improved program and completion by program participants is the outcome goal. The indicator that is the number of and percent of participants who have completed the program. So I think you're getting a sense of the difference between what the outcome is and what the indicator is that the outcome has been achieved. One of the things I just want to point out is that participant satisfaction as a outcome that an organization is trying to achieve is not often something that can be mapped as it occurs all the way along the line, and it's not necessarily sequential. So indicators of that might be things like the number and the percent of program participants who say that they are satisfied with the adult education and training services in this particular example, but I'll leave it to you to read that more in detail once you see the material. So performance indicators, continuing with that, the question is it measurable? When you're trying to determine what those indicators would be is, can you count it? Can you observe it? Can you survey it or collect data about it? One of the challenges in this, of course, is soft outcomes often are difficult to quantify. The hard outcomes often are fairly straightforward, but the soft ones are harder to get a hold of. And so the way to do this is to utilize information that allows you to test against what it was that the person or the population was experiencing before your programs, and then what it is that they're experiencing after they've participated in your programs is one way to do it. Another is to use control groups, but that's often too complex and expensive for not-for-profit organizations, so before and after is the way to address this. The other aspect of soft outcomes is to utilize studies that have been done in the past in your sector that show that a particular change or behavior or skill improvement, in fact, is an indicator of a particular change or outcome that you're trying to measure. You can find indicators within some of the within material that's already existing. For example, is to examine the outcomes used by similar programs. Return to the evidence base of the program that you selected to address or achieve the success that you wanted to. Within those evidence-based programs will be the indicators that you're looking for to show you that you're succeeding in your programs. Hold focus groups with your current and your former clients and ask them what it is that they've seen in terms of their own process through the journey of change that had them feeling like the change was material for them. Collect existing information from the organization. For example, the organization's records you may already be collecting as part of your service delivery. Most programs can use their own records. For example, for a homeless shelter, they may be tracking the number of overnight uses of their facility or the number of times that you have return visits from the same clientele, and that information can become part of your outcome measurement indicators. Or third-party information, maybe there are tests that you send your clients to other specialists that you can then use that information as part of your outcome measurement. Where possible, triangulate the indicators that you're using, a combination of soft and hard evidence to confirm the change. Often the outcome monitoring data is not enough to actually prove the service's effectiveness, and so to really build your case in terms of success, you'll need to bring in evidence from other areas as well. So you've got to ask yourself the hard questions as an organization. Is the evidence that you are utilizing for your outcomes good enough? Are you keeping track of it on a regular basis? Does it have the right scope and depth of information? Is it truly applicable to the problem that you are trying to solve? Is the outcome directly connected? Is there a direct connection between the outcome and the program and the intervention that you have given to the particular population? They can be, of course, other factors that may have contributed to those changes, but if you can make a strong link between your program and the outcome that the population receives, the benefit that the population receives, this builds a much stronger case. So one of the challenges as not-for-profit organizations is to create a list of outcomes, standardization of these outcomes, and there is a group that has been working towards it, the Urban Institute, and we'll give you their contact information at the end of the webinar and our resources, who are trying to come up with a list, a taxonomy of outcomes that we can all utilize. And the basic criteria for these indicators of success and health of an organization is that they're specific, that they're unique and unambiguous and observable, achievable, practical, cost-effective to collect, measurable, understandable, comprehensive and relevant, that they measure important dimensions, and that measurement is valid and appropriate, related to the program, and of real significance, that it's accurate, unbiased, and consistent and verifiable. This is a direct quote of the basis of the information that they are collecting as found indicators, and I've given you an example here of the indicators that they are suggesting for a program-centered satisfaction indicators. So you can go to this website and you will find there that there are 14 sectors that they have created lists of key indicators of health and success of an organization. The next area that we wanted to just focus on a little bit longer is selecting the outcome measurement tools. The main options are really in the area of interviews, self-completion tools, group activities, observations, focus groups, and so forth. There's no real hard and fast rules, but there are some general ideas that or approaches that you may take to selecting which measurement tools you're going to utilize to monitor your outcomes. Will the tool be credible with your stakeholders and funders? While you're going to present the information in a way that is accessible for everybody, they want to feel that the information is in fact founded. It's on true scientific methodology, and so that they feel that the information is legitimate. And this is a very important aspect of the change that has come about within not-for-profit sectors, so that there's a real shift away from anecdotal information to empirical data in order to really prove the credibility of your success. So you want to look at the relative merits of each tool, what it does, what it doesn't do, in other words, what the benefits of it are and what its limitations. Can it be used in segments so that you can save on costs? You want to examine the resources that are required to use the methods, what kind of leadership and the proficiencies and skills are required, the time that it takes for the staff, are there courses and support and information available to you about that particular tool, and what are the terms for using the tool. There are a lot of tools that are available free that you can download, but some of them require fees for utilizing them. Is the tool specific enough or adaptable, flexible enough for you to actually be able to utilize in your programs? You want to go to similar organizations who've used the tool and ask them what their experience with that tool is. One of the opportunities that exist and that funders are very supportive of is to actually create partnerships with other organizations in your outcome measurement. This obviously has a cost and resource saving component, but also has its own specific challenges. So once you've collected the information, you've been monitoring your success, it's time to start to present that information to to various stakeholders. This is really a marketing function, a communication function, and should be treated as such. So you'll want to plan who are the target audiences for the information, consider what budget you have for the communication and what channels and formats you'll use to communicate the outcomes and impact of your organization. Of course, because again, it's a communication exercise or plan, you'll want to evaluate the effectiveness of those communications after they have been after you've gone through your plan. So engage both the logic and the senses. Here you want to include traditional things such as reports and testimonials and so on, but you also want to start to make it much more interesting, much more engaging. So use multimedia, use recordings and photos and analytical charts and mappings and so forth. Break out of the box of just straight numbers, which are not that engaging, and present them in a manner that has that draws people's interest in. Use comparisons and to illustrate the scope of your of what it is that you have done. For example, an organization that's a soup kitchen could say, in a year we feed as many people as would fit into our local stadium or something along those lines, just to give people a perspective that helps them to understand what it is that what the overall achievement is in terms that they can understand. Refrain from jargon, insider jargon. Remember that most of the people who are going to be looking at your outcomes, that you're going to be communicating your outcomes to, are not specialists in your area, so use everyday language. Show the before and after as well as progress along the way in order to better illustrate the journey of change that you have taken your clients through. Be honest. Exaggerating outcomes, exaggerating change is never helpful to anybody. There is a lot that each organization, each program is doing to make change in the areas that they specialize. Highlight those, celebrate those, and honestly, and communicate them strongly, and that will be enough. So just to give you some resources, Charity Evaluation Services, though it is based in London, England, is the best free resource with discussion papers and information and skills development documents, mappings of tools, almost anything you can think of that you would need for an outcome measurement, starting an outcome measurement program, you could find on this site, and I think what they suggest is quite easily adaptable to Canada and the U.S. There's a tool, again, on another British site, which lists all of the measurement tools that they surveyed. And it's the most comprehensive survey that I have seen of all the measurement tools. I do want to have a little disclaimer here that some of the data may be a bit out of date, but I think they're keeping it fairly up to date, and you can download it. We have also are going to attach the Excel spreadsheet of these measurement survey of measurement tools as well, with the materials that you will receive either later today or first thing tomorrow morning. There's also a great U.S. site where there's a project that the Urban Institute has been doing around outcome indicators. You'll find on this site 14 sectors. The outcome indicators have actually been articulated really clearly here, and in the move towards standardizing how we're all going about doing outcome measurement, I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. So visit that site, and then if you're sector is not one of the 14, I think you'll find among one of the 14 something that's very adaptable for your specific organization. So it's been a very intensive learning today. It is an introduction. We would like to hear from you whether you would like us to do more on outcomes in the future, and hope that this introduction has given you a good overview of the area. This is our third webinar. We have 2 more webinars coming up in this series. Making the right moves with foundations is a perspective funder research and process management webinar. We will look at every step in the research and management of prospective funders, utilizing prospect research tools, how to quickly and effectively match to protect prospective funders, and the details on how to manage that process. The secrets of successful grant writing. This webinar will focus on the keys to successful grant writing, letters of inquiry, proposals, and so forth, and what is most imperative for your organization to include in those documents. So we're ready to move into the question and answer period.
All right, thank you, Shetty. Great webinar right here, wonderful information demonstration. So we are ready to answer the questions that the audience has given us. And so Shetty will be stating the questions and then answer them as we move along. All right, here we go.
So the first question is what is being discussed also true for approaching grant makers, corporate grant makers? And yes, I would say it's true. Your outcome measurement program should be integral to your whole organization. What you do as far as communicating outcomes is specific to one group or another, but the program should be intrinsic to your organization. Next question. Next question. Does the outcome learning cycle as applied in the program proposed get described in the letter of interest and or the actual proposal? Yes, absolutely. This is what the grant makers are asking for. They're asking for you to demonstrate this learning cycle of outcomes. They're asking you to demonstrate that you are managing your organization by the outcomes that you are achieving. In fact, the very definition of a high-performing organization, which is what they're asking you to prove that you are, is that you are measuring your results of your programs and using these measurements as critical feedback to improve your organization and improve your programs. Next question. I work with a tiny children's literacy organization. We raise dollars to donate books in the main to the main Afghan language to schools and orphanages in Afghanistan, as education materials are rare. Do you have any suggestions to measure outcomes in war-torn, dangerous country? So it seems to me that the goal that you are trying to achieve is to deliver the books to these children in these countries, and that once those books are delivered, it's difficult for you to measure the impact of the delivery of books there because of the dangers in that country, if I'm understanding your question correctly. Given the dangerous situation, my suggestion to you is to make your outputs and your outcomes measurable pull them back to your delivery of books, and then to utilize existing studies to show that that books delivered to children in situations have an impact on the literacy. So in other words, your organization is focused on the delivery of the books, and then how that impacts the children you'll use from studies about use learning outcomes from other institutions for that. I hope that helps you. Next question, how would you map outcome sequence when you are an education institution already committed to an expected set of degree outcomes? That is, how do we begin to show something new and compelling within set programming? This is a really good question. It's funny, I was actually thinking about this question on my way to work today, so it's great that you raised it. I think one of the most compelling ways to go about this is to think about who the students are in your that you are serving, and what is the need for the skills that you are giving them. What is the need in our community, in our country, in your state or province for what it is that these kids are learning or adults are learning, and then to relate your outcomes to that need as a way of saying that you are impacting that within the community. So, for example, I was speaking to a college in Texas about 3 weeks ago, and they have noticed that there is a growing need because of new resources that have been found in their region. There's a growing need for trucking. There's a growing industry around trucking, and so they are fundraising, and it's a very expensive item. It's over $1 million for a truck simulation machinery. So this is, you can see what I'm trying to say here. So it's that tying of existing programs for your university, your college, to the community and its needs, and then showing that impact in that way. I hope that helps. Next question, can you provide an example of such outcome measurement tools or where one might go to find this? Yes, we are including a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet of outcome measurement tools divided by sector, and that'll get you started on that. And there's some information there on how to contact the various people who have developed those measurement tools. Next question, as a research institute, we may not always have a direct context with the broader population. How can we measure our success when we are not directly affecting people in a traditional way? For example, we mainly measure based on scientific papers published. So you are affecting somebody. You are having an impact on something. Your work was created for a reason. I had a similar question with a think tank in the last webinar, and again, my answer is pretty much the same as I gave to them, and that is that your work is impacting the sector, it's impacting the thinking, it's impacting where the direction of the research and thereby the services that are being given to certain populations. So it's that impact on the thinking in that area. This is what you want to use as your outcomes. This is where you want to focus in terms of not on the broader population, but on the thinking that goes behind the programs that the broader population will have. Can you discuss the use of qualitative indicators? So mostly qualitative indicators, you're using, these are soft outcomes, and you're relating to new skills or behaviors that are an indication that the change has occurred. So I think you'll find in the qualitative indicators outline that we're going to send you how you go about doing those. But those are usually measured. They're the most difficult, but they're usually measured on terms of can be measured in terms of qualitative data, such as descriptions of the change, the before and after, the sequencing of what happens along the journey of change. Next question, do you have any ideas for increasing the number of client survey responses? Yeah, keep it short. Keep it short, keep it focused. Only ask questions that you're actually going to utilize the information to make changes in your organization or use it to guide services. So if they see that the questions relate to the services that they receive, they'll be more likely to respond. You can also incent people to respond more to, so provide incentives in some way. Be careful with that because you don't want the incentive to skew the response, but you can, in fact, incent whether it's additional services or prizes or, what have you for that. Next, where do you start with existing programs and should only select one core program? Should you only select a core program? I think you start with looking at the impact that you want to make in your area, with your population. You look at the programs that you feel best make that impact, and that's where you start as far as where you're going to measure outcomes. Start small, pick one or two indicators that you're going to track, and then build as you learn from that process. Do you have any tips in coming up with performance indicators for more intangible outcomes? I think I've answered that question already, so I'll just move to the next one. And again, I refer you to the Urban Institute's key performance indicator that you'll find on that website that we've given you in the resources. What if my organization's programs are a bit of a stretch to what foundations fund? We are an organization that is impacted by government cuts and would like to continue some of our programs but can't find a good fit. I guess I would suggest to you that you look at your sector and you look at what foundations are interested in funding in your sector. Not every program that you are doing is of interest to foundations. So research the foundations that are most likely to give to you. Look at what they're giving in that sector. For example, if you are I don't know what type of organization you are, but let's say that you are a youth development organization. Are foundations interested in at-risk children? Are our foundations interested? You're telling me tourism. Okay. So it sounds like part of your the reason why you're a stretch is, given the sector, is that you may be much more in the area of earned incomes as opposed to contributed incomes, and that's the way that you're a stretch. I guess I would suggest to you that you look at the impacts of your programs on your community and how that serves various aspects of the community by the increase in tourism. You may want to also look at who you're partnered with, who is a not-for-profit organization, and how your work impacts theirs, perhaps partnering with them in terms of your applications, and so forth. So that would be my suggestion there. The other thing I want to say just in general to everybody is please do not, in your applications to foundations, ask foundations to fill a gap because you've lost government funding. They just are not that interested. It's not a compelling or an attractive ask for them. So better to ask them to be a part of something new and exciting that you are doing, or to be a part of a program and to enhance that program than to ask them to fulfill a gap. That's just, basic strategic approach to your ask. Last question, it looks like. What would be great tools that we can plug in information to generate data, i.e., I receive a software program that I could use for cost allocation. These tools are helpful to small organizations like mine. Again, the spreadsheet that we are sending you has tools listed. I would also suggest that you go to the charity evaluation website. They have fairly extensive discussions on IT tools for measuring, for outcome measurement, and again, I would suggest that you have a look there and the various tools that are available to you. If you can also talk to your the suppliers of the tools that you are already utilizing and ask them how their reports and other measurement tools that are already built into their software can start to help you to track and tailor the tracking and monitor your outcomes within your organization. So I think that is all of the questions that we have today, and if you have any other questions and get them in within the next 5 minutes, we'll answer them in our materials that we send you later today. Otherwise, we will call that done.
Yes, thank you, Shadi, for answering all those questions, and thank you to the audience for asking. Please note that you will all receive a copy of today's webinar, the recording, as well as the updated slide presentation and additional handouts that we've mentioned, that Shadi has mentioned in the presentation. You will receive them later this afternoon when everything has been settled. So at the conclusion of today's webinar, we'd like to thank everyone for your attendance. And we do have a post-webinar survey. If you would take some time to fill that out, we would really appreciate it. You can include any feedback that you want to see something in the future or things that can improve your experience today. We'd love you to fill that survey out and let us know. So once again, on behalf of Metasoft Systems, myself and Shadi, we'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and we wish you to have a great day.